Hi, this is Nairi, Fly Little Birds, all about adoption, fostering I should say, and childhood trauma. And today we're going to talk about how to help children understand other people's boundaries. So if you have a child that actually is a little bit too familiar with people and tries to get too close, sometimes they'll try and sit on people's laps, sometimes they'll be right next to them, sometimes they'll interrupt conversations. You know the type of child I mean, that they're sort of there all the time, and you understand that, but when it comes to other relatives or other friends, they don't understand that, and the child doesn't understand that, they don't understand that. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, clearly this is going to depend on the child's history. So if it's that your adopted child or foster child is quite new to you and they are trying to build up an attachment, and the way that they're doing that is to be in on everything and actually interrupt you and be next to you all the time, I'm going to be totally honest with you, that will take time. That will just take time. You just need to be honest with the child and say, okay, I think you need to wait until I finish talking now. Okay, I think you can sit next to me. You don't have to be climbing all over me. That would be the same as that they're trying to do that to other people in the family as well. That you just need to be gentle and guide the child that not everybody is going to want this, and you don't want this all the time, and it's okay. It's okay for them to be a little bit apart from you sometimes. But because they're trying to build attachment, a meaningful attachment with you, rather than more of an avoidance style where the child ignores you a lot or goes off a lot or doesn't engage so much, they're doing the opposite. That is going to take time and guidance and just being kind, really, but firm. Okay, you can always be firm. Don't ever think that because you have a lot of issues with a child and that you need to guide them, that you can't be firm as well as kind, because you do need to have those boundaries. If you know that your child has a history of certain types of abuse, then this is going to be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more tricky. So if we say sexual abuse, then sometimes children want to be over familiar because this is how they believe they're going to ingratiate themselves with people. And I've come across this in fostering and in adopting, that really younger children just don't get it. If they have been in a sort of grooming situation in a family where they've been asked to do certain things, and this is how they then get their reward back. I won't go into too much detail here because this is not a video about sexual abuse, but those types of children might feel that they need to do certain things to keep people happy, and sometimes those boundaries will tip over into something that feels a little bit more sexual. It may not be overtly sexual, but you're feeling that it doesn't feel quite right. Then you are going to have to be firmer, and you're going to have to say, this is, I don't want this from you. I don't need this from you. I understand that you think that this is what perhaps people might want, but actually, we don't do that. And sort of try to show them a different way of affection. Okay, so should I give you an example? I'll give you an example of a child that I had that when they were sat on my lap would do certain things, and I'd be like, I knew it didn't feel right, and I would just say, like, you don't need to do that. Okay, you don't need to do that to me for me to be happy here. We're just going to read a story and we're just going to have a hug, and that's okay. You can kiss me on the cheek, but we don't do those other things that you're trying to do there. And to start with, that was very confusing for this child, really, really confusing. But after a while, they got the message that this wasn't something that we needed to do anymore. And it's just patience, and sometimes something will come out of the blue. And the difficulty will be is when this is happening, of course, with other siblings in the family. So you may have adopted or foster, and you've got other foster children or other children in the family, or other relatives. I think with relatives you could preempt that something might happen and that ask the relative to sort of keep a slight distance. I think with a child, you're going to have to tell them that if this happens, or this looks like it's going to happen, can you come and tell me right away? And give the children and the family the power to say no. And if it is like that, okay, so I know we're going down more the sexual abuse situation at the moment, then you really would need to keep an eye on play all the time. You wouldn't just be letting them go off in different rooms. Even if you've adopted and you have other relatives coming into the family to bring their children to play, if you think there's a chance that those boundaries are going to tip into slightly sexualized behavior, then you might be happily chatting to relatives, you might have a celebration on, but you just wouldn't let those children out of your sight to begin with. As the years go by, we have found that actually we can we have been able to let things out more, but in the beginning, when children are younger, and actually particularly pre-puberty, this is what we found anyway, is that the boundaries are all blurred when it comes to affection, even more so pre-puberty, when children don't, and pre-understanding sexual things, children might actually tip over onto things a lot quicker. So sorry, that was really, really waffly. The other way to come at this is to talk to the people that you know outside of the family. So say you realise that the child you have is very, very kind of no stranger danger, straight in there, straight in people's faces, talking, trying to interrupt conversations, trying to sit on people's laps, and just very much a presence. The way to come at this is possibly to train the adults in the family a little bit to understand that actually this is not really what you want from them, that you understand why they're doing it, and that perhaps you can control that better. But it would be really worth talking to the adults that come regularly, fairly regularly to the house. And if you're going to have a special occasion when perhaps you've got adults coming to the house that don't normally come, maybe you need to preempt. Maybe you need to explain that this is what will happen, likely happen, and that this is what you would like them to say to the child so that they're ready for it. Because in our experience, I think what happens is people overcompensate when you have adopted children, even foster children, and they'll allow the child to climb all over them because they don't want to say no, and they want to be kind, and they, you know, all of a sudden this child's really friendly, and they'll interrupt them 100 times and they'll let them do that. We still even have that now sometimes, when a child, one of our children, will just constantly take over the conversation and not let anybody else talk. And sometimes people will look at you when you say, okay, that's enough now, that's enough questions, because they think that it's just a natural thing for what the child is doing. But actually, a lot of what they're doing is driven by anxiety, having to control the conversation, having to sit all over people, interrupt people, is driven by anxiety and fear of not being noticed or actually not being approved. And so sometimes it is worth talking to relatives and saying, look, this is the boundaries that we have in place at the moment, and this is what works for us. We strongly suggest that if the child does this, that you say this to them, or that you don't let them do this, because once they've done that once to you, they're going to keep on doing that. So once they've clambered all over you in the middle of a conversation that you're having with if it was you, say me, then they're going to think they can always do that. They can break up the conversation and take control of your affection right there and then, rather than wait for it. So it's definitely worth talking to your relatives. When you take them out in public, it's a lot more difficult, I'm sure you realise, and this video might have been, request might have been around that, I don't know. If you're going out in public, you might have to be a bit more guarded, okay? Especially if this child just approaches anybody and just does anything. The way to do this is to keep them close. So you may feel like if you go to a bouncy castle party, or you're going to a party, that it's fair to the child to let them go a little bit because they're of an age where you normally would. I wouldn't do that. I would stick quite close to them, especially if they're not known to you that well. So say you're within the first 6 months of an adoption or foster placement, you don't know the child that well yet really, and you're going to a party where there are lots of strangers and you think that your child is going to just approach people. I wouldn't let that happen, because different people will kind of respond in a different way. Some people will just think it's sweet and cute, but if the child's 8, they may not. And some people will like be a little bit put off by it. You don't want your child to experience those negative reactions, or even people that are overcompensating. You want them to understand what social occasions look like and what they mean. So you might have to interpret the world around them for them. So you may well have to be close. Sorry, that's the dog. You might have to be close to them and stick close to them, and actually say to them, whisper in their ear, you know, let's come away now. Let's let those two people play together on their own, or let's let those adults have that conversation. Or you may have to correct them a little bit, you know, if they sort of jump in and say something, because you're training them to understand social situations, and you may be doing that for many, many years. So it doesn't hurt to do that from the beginning. It doesn't hurt to interpret that world for them. If you're going through this with children, it means a certain style of attachment, to be honest, and different children react in different ways, but it is an attachment thing. It is something that they have to learn about relationships and attachment to you first and then to other people. So it's really good to train them up with you and then have another adult, could be granny, could be granddad, it could be anyone actually that you choose, that you can start training up the same. So if you've got a really good friend and you've got your child around, you can start training them up around that friend to understand these social boundaries and, you know, learning people's, you know, their own, other people's boundaries. Okay, so hope that helps. If there was something else that you wanted, whoever asked for this, around the boundaries, put it in the comments below. So if I've covered some of it, but I haven't covered all of it and you wanted something else, let me know. And I will see you all on Fly Little Birds. Thank you.